Hi, I'm Alex Mozed, and welcome to Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle between large tech monopolies and traditional incumbents. So today, first topic is around StockX. StockX and Goat, which Foot Locker put $100 million into. They are both what started out as sneaker consignment marketplaces, B2C, vertical specific marketplaces. Consignment being, you have third-party sellers saying, hey, I have really cool sneakers, and other people want to buy these sneakers. Even though sneakers are heavily consolidated on the manufacturing side of the supply chain, there is a lot of fragmented supply because you have so many people buying them retail and then reselling them. So you have your producers are these resellers buying them at retail for say $200 or $300, and then if you can get them, because there's so many limited releases and all these things, then you can sell them for $400 or $500, or many of them are much higher than that, or in the thousands of dollars. But none of them are retailing for $1,000. So there's a huge market for middlemen to buy low and then resell at a higher price. And that's essentially what StockX and Goat have been doing. So StockX did this State of StockX report that just came out, and there's a full report which can go into more detail. But basically, the takeaway is they're on fire. This is not cheap stuff. I think one part of this is there's new and there's used. And so, you would say to yourself, none of this stuff is cheap. There might be discounts and deals to be had on here. But what they're saying is May and June were their two biggest buyer months in the history of the whole platform. And, they say here they've done $2.5 billion of GMV over their lifetime. Last year, we were reporting for 2019, they said they were on track to do $1 billion in GMV annually. They've basically done over 5 million transactions. They have 10 million lifetime sales, and over half of those in the past year. So 5 million transactions in the past 12 months, I guess. Europe is growing for them here. So just really interesting to go deeper into the information here. So $500 is the average price paid for shoes. It's not cheap stuff, right? So this is certainly a more affluent demographic of shopper. Maybe it's just because these people don't have no other hobbies. There's no sports. You can't go out to restaurants and socialize and go out to clubs and nightlife, and you're just kind of stuck at home. So what do? You go on StockX and shop. I guarantee that's probably part of the uptick here, where a lot of this demand, a lot of this their consumer base has disposable income, haven't maybe been as negatively affected by COVID as less well-off consumers, right, that are not going to be looking to spend $500 on a pair of sneakers. The consumers are just captive consumers. They have nothing else to do but go shop on StockX. That's one theory I have. The other theory is that I do think people are clearing out their closets, and they do have a lot of extra time, and they are saying, hey, you know what? Let me sell this used stuff that I haven't worn, or I don't really want to wear anymore. And so I do think you are seeing a lot of used inventory come onto these consignment marketplaces. And then therefore, you probably do get some good deals. Again, still expensive. It's not like you're getting a $500 pair of shoes for $100, but you are getting good relative deals, because there is a lot of used inventory coming online on the supply side to these consignment marketplaces. So StockX and Goat are both private, but Farfetch and The RealReal are the kind of more holistic luxury goods marketplaces, somewhat similar to them, but like designer shoes and handbags and these other kinds of, product lines. Whereas these two companies are really, they're now branching out into other stuff like watches. There are also watch marketplaces, which are very cool. And I think I've heard doing pretty well during COVID as well. Again, who's spending thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on a watch? probably that demographic is a little bit more insulated than others during these calamities going on. But anyway, Farfetch, I mean, they're down 6% today, but the whole stock market has just started to tank in the last few hours because I guess people have started to realize that there's crazy unemployment and the Fed is just artificially inflating stocks by going on crazy spending sprees. But whatever, that's besides the point. That said, now it's 5%, stock market's all over the place. But Farfetch and the RealReal, two public companies, Farfetch out of the UK, RealReal, the kind of US equivalent, smaller. RealReal stock is here, about $1 billion market cap. Anyway, you look at these companies over the past month. This is the past 6 months. RealReal got down to around $5 or $6 in mid-March. Farfetch got down to, they actually didn't really go down that much in mid-March. I mean, they went down a little bit, maybe into the $7 or $8 a share, but now they're up to about $21 a share. And so the interesting thing with both of these companies is StockX just came out with this information. They said May and June were our 2 best months ever. Now, this is a growing company, so you should hopefully want to see them having their best month ever is kind of like a repeat trend, right? That you should have huge growth, right? Like that, these companies are huge growth. You're doing $1 billion in GMV. You should be having huge growth anyway. But they are clearly saying that their marketplace is doing very well, even better than what they would have hoped to do if Corona hadn't happened, right? So what that leads me to say is, I wonder if the same or similar thing is happening to Farfetch and RealReal. And I would imagine that you probably got a pretty good chance that they would say something similar. It's not an exact corollary, but Etsy is, kind of like these craft-made goods. Etsy literally has tripled in its stock price in the past few months. So these kind of smaller boutique marketplaces that have kind of some new or like used craft good inventory, we're seeing them do very, very well. Partially because you can't go to retail stores, A, and B, you're able to maybe get a lot of this kind of extra used inventory or additional supply, which just helps that consumer demand transact. So my stock pick would be that when these companies release earnings, I think Farfetch is releasing earnings in mid-August. My guess is that they're going to have a pretty strong Q2, and that the stock market will reward them, assuming not everything has collapsed and then I can't predict any of that. But everything else remaining equal, I think Farfetch and RealReal, relative to what one would expect their performance to be, will outperform. And I think you're seeing that in StockX's numbers and some other pockets of certain types of product marketplaces. I mean, even if you include Amazon, that Amazon stock's over $3,000 a share. I mean, Amazon's also been doing extremely well, just given how big they already are and the scale that they operate. So that is pretty interesting. So we'll continue to follow that. On the other hand, though, Yelp and restaurants are not doing so well. Yelp has been saying that, half of the restaurants on Yelp temporarily closed. So just think about that. I mean, Yelp, they have restaurants all over the country. And they had originally said that more than half or roughly half of the restaurants on Yelp had closed, right? Temporarily. Now they're saying they've permanently closed. So 60% of the 26,000 temporarily closed restaurants on Yelp are now permanently closed. Yikes. We're talking like 15,000, a little more than 15,000 restaurants permanently closing. Yelp's previous report in April found that more than 175,000 total businesses were closed in some capacity. That's not just restaurants, right? There's a lot of other businesses besides restaurants on Yelp. And they've been tracking about 5,500 temporarily. So they had said, there are about 5,500 temporarily shuttered bars and other nightlife establishments. Now they're saying 44% of those, so call it half. You got about 2,500, 2,700 of the ones that were temporarily shuttered are now permanently closed. And you can see here this graph here of temporary closures and now permanent closures. It's pretty devastating. It's really just sad to see. Honolulu, Hawaii, need tourism. There's no tourism, and tourism's not coming back anytime soon. This is closures per 1,000 businesses here. So you can see the red is the permanent closure. The gray is temporary closures, right? San Francisco is the second highest. Interestingly enough, you have lots of California cities on here. Actually, probably about 60 or 70% of their top metros here are all in California. By state, similarly, Hawaii has the most, is at the top of the list by state in terms of temporary and permanent temporary closures. And then permanent closures thereafter, Nevada, California, Arizona, and then it kind of drops off to Arizona, Washington, Oregon. It's really tough times. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Like rent is such a huge part of the expense of any of these businesses, restaurants, entertainment, nightclub, these kinds of venues. And there's only so long that the landlord's able to give you grievances or work with you. What are you going to do? Because even if you can open up, you can only open up partially, or you have to have outdoor seating, and you can only, service a portion of what you could have serviced. And it's just such a difficult business. It is a difficult business in a regular business cycle, right? The margins on anything in the food industry, whether it's food distribution, grocery, restaurants. I mean, the margins are razor thin in a regular operating environment, let alone now you talk about this and you can only have at best, say, half the volume that you could have had. And who knows about if your food expenses have now gone higher because of supply chain issues. And I mean, there are just so many challenges for restaurants and nightlife and all of these businesses that, are in person. And can food delivery make up for it? Clearly not. So, hopefully you can just go into bankruptcy, shed yourself of the debt, of the lease, of the liabilities, and then hopefully in the future at some point, reopen. But you don't know when that's going to be and how long is it going to be like this. And especially if you're in these colder cities where, in the summer or the fall, you can do these temporary outdoor solutions. But what are you going to do in the winter if, assuming you still have certain protocols, you don't want to have indoor dining and so on and so forth? I think very realistic concerns and considerations. What are you going to do then? It's just a very dismal outlook. So, there's this weird discrepancy where the stock market just kind of seems to be shaking this thing off. But I mean, you look at these numbers and it's a very different story. Maybe that's some of what we're seeing, why the stock market's kind of having a pseudo crash right now. But we'll see. In other news, Uber just continues to chug along. They bought this public transportation company called Routematch. Seems like a relatively small acquisition for them, but basically they provide software to public transit agencies. And the thing that I thought was interesting about this is we've also seen Waze do this, where Waze is like a more articulate version of Google Maps. They drain your battery a lot more than Google Maps, but they also provide a lot more user-generated data. So, as a user, you get points for flagging certain things like accidents or hazards on the side of the road, or, police having speed traps. Although I think the police are preoccupied with other things these days. Waze has a lot more of this granular information. They get a lot more accurate GPS readings. If I'm really in a traffic jam, I'll hop on over to Waze. As I like their kind of traffic planning and that data a little bit better than Google Maps. There is an integration because, when Google bought Waze, it was funny. It was like $1 billion acquisition. And their reason for buying it was basically, we don't want anyone else to have this. So we bought it. $1 billion. That was quite literally the press release. Maybe not word for word. That was pretty much their messaging around it, though. And they're like, don't worry, it's kind of a inconsequential price for us. $1 billion, whatever. Anyway, Waze, what Waze has started to do is have a more integrated solution with transit departments and with these kind of local municipalities, transit agencies. So makes sense. You're seeing now Uber follow a similar path there. I think it's a great way also for Uber to engender support from these government entities and say, hey, how can we help you? How can we help bring software to you? I can guarantee you that Routematch, I mean, this was a private business founded in 2000. There's no public information on them raising external capital. So that means it had to be a profitable company. What will Uber do to Routematch now that they own it? What they will probably do is lower the price of its software and try to get a lot more adoption of the software by subsidizing the cost of the software, right? And that is pretty much it's a very classic 101 platform 101 strategy. It's called commoditize the complement, basically saying you buy technology and then you give it away for free, or you heavily subsidize the price or the cost of that software for your users. You lower the barrier to entry, so you get more adoption and more usage on your platform, and you're monetizing the usage on the platform. So now Uber isn't necessarily trying to, monetize the usage of the public transit agencies, but what they want to do is I think want to start to monetize the money that you spend on public transportation. So what does that mean? Like buying a metro pass in the subway, or the bus passes to take either your bus transportation, your subway, or train transportation. These are all government run transportation entities. So now if Uber is providing software into these agencies, Routematch has partnerships with over 500 public transportation agencies. They should be able to have a much tighter collaboration to help consumers choose, do I want an Uber ride-sharing car? Now they have, the scooters, the e-scooters. Now it could also be take the subway, take the bus, and you just pay for that all out of the Uber wallet. We've seen Uber make a big push into Uber wallets, right? Where there's now an Uber credit card. You can store a balance in the Uber wallet. You can use that wallet for transportation and Uber Eats. Again, you're just kind of seeing the breadth and the power and the scale of the platform conglomerate versus Lyft. I mean, I don't see or hear of Lyft doing any of these things. I don't really hear much about Lyft anymore. Lyft is around, but in terms of saying, hey, how are we continuing to disrupt? How are we continuing to make waves? How are we continuing to evolve and innovate on our business model? I actively see Uber trying things, and some things aren't working, right? Like trying to buy Grubhub. But they're trying, and they're in an easier position in the sense that they're the dominant ride-sharing company compared to Lyft. But that goes back to my point on the power of the platform conglomerate versus these platform companies that have just one platform business. And that's what everything is based upon, right? It's kind of like these single-digit billion-dollar market cap platform companies. Are they able to really break out and then start to diversify and have a couple different platform businesses stack on top of each other? It's very hard to make that leap from kind of individual platform entity, which is a great business. And if you're the founder of that business, my hat is off to you. You've created huge value, huge wealth for yourself and many others, right? I mean, it's no small feat. But from from a Platt perspective, the platform ETF with Wisdom Tree, or just looking at, that broader trajectory once you hit IPO, which one of these platform companies do you want to bet on? I think you start to see a very different profile of business, platform conglomerate versus individual platform company. In closing, another example of this is Microsoft, which just came out with their Q2 earnings, and they crushed on earnings, but the stock was down. They crushed on earnings, but the stock was down. Why is that? because these stocks are basically all based on their growth prospects. So they had great earnings. I mean, they beat on revenue, 38 billion versus 36.5 billion expected. This is in one quarter. They beat on, a bunch of stats for Q2. But the thing that really dragged down their stock was they had lighter expectations that they set on future growth. So, they were less bullish on what the future entails than I guess what analysts and the stock market had hoped. And so their stock went down. This was, I thought, a really good chart. You can see here their growth by different product line, Azure being at the top, and then cloud services, enterprise services, Office consumer products, cloud services. This is kind of this middle line here. I think that includes LinkedIn. Yeah, they own LinkedIn. It's bundled in there. Search ads declined. That's funny. It's actually the only thing that declined. And then look at Xbox. Up 65%, all the way at the bottom. That kind of makes sense too. Everyone's just at home playing video games, buying stuff on Fortnite or the Xbox game store, right? But look at this strong growth all over the place. I mean, 19% on server products, 19% on Office 365, 47% on Azure here. It's slowing. Azure is slowing, but it's a massive business for them, so that makes sense. But nonetheless, stock is down. Interesting, right? That's not platform conglomerate anymore. Microsoft, they are now straight up just monopoly status. So, it's platform conglomerate on top of platform conglomerate. I mean, they own LinkedIn and it's not even called out in the breakout. It's bucketed into a line item of revenue. That's how platform conglomerate Microsoft is. But so is Apple and Google and Facebook and Amazon. And that is the last topic. So today, or on Monday, I think that is what date is that? Monday. The 27th, on Monday, the 27th at noon Eastern, a very special show called Everyone But Microsoft Testifying in Front of Congress. And the CEOs, you're going to have Zucky, you're going to have Sundar from Google, you're going to have Jeff from Amazon, and you're going to have Tim from Apple. And they are all going to be testifying in front of Congress, all four of them at the same time. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I wonder what they're going to hit him with. I mean, what just came out today is there's some other kind of suit or challenge against Apple. So all these politicians are now kind of, they're getting all their shots in, or the DOJ is getting their shot in before now the CEOs have to testify on Monday. So noon Eastern, don't watch it on TV. Watch it on Winner Take All live stream. We're going to be streaming the Four Horsemen without Microsoft there in front of Congress on Monday. That's going to be one you don't want to miss. So I will talk to you in a couple days. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us.